Miner. I'm the producer of the History Lecture Series. I'd like to welcome you all. This is our 5th lecture in the series for this season. We still have 3 more to go. Tonight's presentation is about a book that was written about Louisiana homicides. It's one of my favorite topics. I'm a little morbid at times. I love all the crime shows. We have 2 presenters, not one. One of them is an instructor here with us at UMass in history, Mr. Gauthreaux. He is a veteran of the U.S. Army. He served as a deputy with the Orleans Parish Criminal Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Office, excuse me. He has a bachelor and master's degree in history, and he's written several books, contributed to several historical magazines and an online historical book site. Very intelligent, very well-versed. You may have seen him in one of our lectures last year. Also, we have Dr. Daryl Hippensteel. He has been a professor of criminal justice at Gauthreaux for 22 years. Basically, he started the criminal justice program over there. He's a decorated combat veteran, having served in Vietnam, which, thank you guys both for your service. We appreciate that. He served on many advisory committees, part of it as a governor's representative of the Daryl program, which is very valuable in our schools today. And he's also a motivational speaker. I cannot wait to hear this lecture, and so now I will welcome, without further ado, Gauthreaux and Daryl Hippensteel.
Really, it was nothing. All I did was hand out blankets for 2.5 years, but I wore the uniform. Those of you that have never been to one of my lectures before, my name is Gauthreaux. I am the co-author of Dark Bayou. And I'd like to welcome all of you fellow sickos here that are interested in murder. Some of you people that are budding serial killers, this is not an instructional manual. Okay? This book came about very happenstance. We were sitting in the office one day when I worked at Delgado and kind of trying to figure out how to get away from our better halves. We figured we'd write a book. Took it and we thought about the sickest thing we could write about and get away with. Not really. We wanted the book is dedicated to the victims who won't be forgotten. The foreword was written by Charles Fody. Actually, we had finished the manuscript and we were sitting in the office and all of a sudden, Charlie Fody walks in. He was a student of Daryl's at Delgado, and we said, Charlie, we'd like you to write the foreword to our new book. He goes, as long as it makes me look intelligent. And we said, we're going to try real hard, Charlie. We're going to try real hard. It's just been well received around the state. We had an invitation to the Louisiana Book Festival, and we were at the New Orleans Book Festival. We've been to the Barnes and Nobles. We've been to a couple of libraries, and it has done really, really well. Neither one of us are going to retire anytime soon, but we enjoyed it. We enjoyed writing it. It took a lot out of us emotionally, and when you see our presentation, you'll understand why. Battle not with the monsters, lest ye become a monster, and if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. As an historian, I always thought of myself as a military historian, but now lately I've become a crime historian because I was able to analyze and interpret different types of research that we did for the book, and you'll see what I mean. The first thing I'm going to talk about tonight is the first godfather of Louisiana. When I was here last time, I spoke about Italian Louisiana, and the one problem that we have in doing research on the mafia is you can't really go to a library and expect to find a journal where somebody says, we broke 10 legs today. You can't really find that. So it's a lot of supposition. But in this particular case, all the evidence just falls into line. And this is who crime historians believe was the first godfather. 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. That was a sign above Carlos Marcello's door. Actually, Benjamin Franklin said that. And we're going to talk about the mafia a little bit. And I'm going to use words like reputed and alleged. Okay, because I can't really say anything definite. when we talk about the mafia, because I don't know who I'm going to be offending in the audience. All right, okay, what am I doing? Oh, there it is. Joseph P. Macheca was born in 1843 as Peter J. Savannah. His father was thrown into prison, and later on he was adopted by Joseph P. Macheca Sr., and they moved to the New World with the Italians to Louisiana. At the age of 17, he joined the European Guards and later deserted and went to Houston for a little while. Then when he came back, he started, quote, businesses, end quote. And he became pretty wealthy doing that from the age of 17 till about the age of 35. We know a lot about Joseph Macheca, especially at UNO. They have a big Joseph Macheca file, but it doesn't have any journals in there saying that he's the mafia don. Basically, it's just receipts and things, and we're supposed to analyze those and come up with this information. But if you listen to other historians, this one makes sense. It makes sense that Joseph Macheca was the first godfather. Now, we're not necessarily going to say that he wasn't the first godfather, but he's the first Italian that actually organized Italians into businesses, end quote. When we talk about businesses, you know what I mean, businesses. Henry Clay Warmoth was a governor. Now, how Macheca made his bones was that he organized a group of Italians in the French Quarter that actually came to the notice of the state on September 12, 1874, during the Battle of Liberty Place. And then they actually helped the White League. They thought they'd take their side. And Macheca was a little disappointed because the next day in the paper, it didn't mention his name. And we all know how reputed mafia dons are about having their names mentioned, especially back then. Now they don't want to draw so much attention to themselves. This is a photo of Joseph Macheca. Now what Macheca did after the Battle of Liberty Place was that he became famous in democratic organizations and politics. And he eventually rose to own a few businesses in New Orleans. And he happened to, somebody answer that for me, please. He happened to butt heads with a gentleman by the name of James D. Houston. And James D. Houston, in our book, I don't even know if we talk about this in our book, I think I talk about it in Italian Louisiana, I kind of picked out was one of the people involved in a conspiracy to kill David Hennessy. Now, a lot of people have heard of David Hennessy. And last year, when I started doing research on Joseph Macheca, I got a phone call from a gentleman named Edith Hogue, and he said, Alan, he says, we got something we want you to see. So I said, well, where is it? He said, at the Civil War Memorial Hall. I don't know if Ron or Curtis knows about this. And they brought me in the back room, they opened up this box. It was one of the shotguns that they found at the crime scene that killed David Hennessy. And I went, can I get a picture with it? And he said, only if you pay us $125. Well, Joseph Macheca made quite the name for himself. And in fact, he was one of the victims after the assassination of David Hennessy. I wrote in the book, the experience of past years has demonstrated that those who now hold the government are incompetent to rule, that their administration can but result in oppression and desolation, and that their rule can come but corruption, demoralization, and degradation in every department of life. That's a big mouthful. Okay. Basically what was going on is that after Macheca did not get the accolades that he felt he deserved, he started making a lot of noise. And the city fathers decided that they were going to try and find a way to get rid of him and a few others. And Joseph Macheca is the first mafia don. This is that all place here. Okay. After October of 1890, I'm not going to give you too many details because if I do, you're not going to want to buy the book. Because then again, we only have 2 left, so, you know.
Amazon has some more.
Amazon has more. On October 16, 1890, David C. Hennessy was assassinated, and the press naturally assumed that it was a result of a vendetta. Now, we all know what a vendetta is. Eventually, they rounded up a few people. They arrested 19 suspects and held 11 over for trial, but at the time there was a lot of anti-Italian sentiment in New Orleans. And so I think Joseph McKechnie getting involved with those being arrested with those other 19 gentlemen kind of sealed his fate, as far as that's concerned. In March 14th of 1891 was called for a mass meeting, and over 10,000 people met in the Congo Square, marched on over to the old parish prison, which was located where Tremay Housing Project is now. Pulled out, I think it was 9 of them, and one of them was Joseph McKechnie, who fired a single Winchester shot, hitting him in the forehead and killing him instantly. That's not the whole story. If you look at the property records after Joseph McKechnie was killed, you'll notice that James D. Houston now became the deed holder of all the businesses that were let go by Joseph McKechnie that actually were relinquished after his death. Well, if Joseph McKechnie was the first godfather, then it actually passed, what is it, the peaceful transition of power, passed from Joseph McKechnie to a few other people that we associate with the mafia. Up here is Charles Matranga. He actually retired alive. He was wounded during the lynching that took place on March 14th, 1891. He hid under another Italian's dead body, is how he got out. And he later on, he lived a long life, and then he retired from being a reputed mob boss. There's Silver Dollar Sam Corolla right here, and he gave the reins over to our friend. Everybody know who this is? Exactly, reputed mob boss. That's why I said reputed. There's a thing on Facebook. I keep getting these summons to come to these pages, and one of them has to do with the mafia in New Orleans. Now, it's not that I don't like being associated with these things, it's that, from what I understand, any type of investigative journalist does not live long enough to collect royalties if they write on the mafia. So this is my last venture into the mafia that you will ever see. Okay? Sorry. But we do have a rich history of it down here. In fact, somebody came up to me about 2 weeks ago and said, "Do you know where the bodies are buried?" No. I said, "I do." Okay, first of all, you gotta watch how much wine these people drink when they walk up to you. And the second thing is that you don't take anything, even as a professional historian, at face value. And I wasn't gonna go to some swamp with somebody I didn't know. Okay? But we do have a rich history of that. I recently became acquaintances with a gentleman by the name of Sal Perricone, who was a former federal prosecutor, and he was talking to me about certain things. He's a novelist in his own right, pretty good too. And he was telling me about how he prosecuted mafia trials, and I said, "Well, Sal, is the mafia dead?" He said, "No, they're just on life support right now. They're waiting for a new crop to come up." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, that's great news." So, but it was a period of history where everybody's interested in it. Everybody wants to know about murder. It's that dark part of your psyche that even the mob, anything involving Italians is fantastic. It's very interesting. So before I get shot, I'm going to move on. A respectable poisoner. This was a young lady in September of 1911. Her name was Elise Crawford. She came home from work one day and said she wasn't feeling that well. And make a long story short, she died at the end of the day. And come to find out, she had been poisoned. And the first suspect that they came to was this young lady right here, her sister, Annie Crawford. Annie Crawford had a long history with poison. There were a couple of relatives before this that had died of poisoning. And there was insurance involved. First thing, isn't that right there? You follow the money? Follow the money. Okay, and she had several life insurance policies on her parents. So that's 2 people and another sister. That's 3 people. And then she poisoned another sister. That's 4 people. Are you starting to see a pattern here? And she eventually went on trial. Of course, you know, when you're dealing with trials with young ladies back then, oh, who's going to suspect someone so genteel? Okay? And it came out in trial that Ann Crawford was mentally disturbed. Not in a legal sense, but as like your next door neighbor, you go, he's crazy. Okay? That's how they started looking at her. And she was represented by Lionel Adams. Lionel Adams, of all people, if you don't know who Lionel Adams is, he was one of the top attorneys in New Orleans around the turn of the century. And in fact, he was one of the attorneys at the Hennessy trial for the Italians. This gentleman right here, St. Clair Adams, no relation. These two men were so passionate. Lionel Adams was Annie Crawford's attorney. St. Clair Adams said, I got a slam dunk here. And they got into a literal fist fight at the trial. Now, if you've never read New Orleans papers, this is strictly entertainment, okay? It doesn't matter whether the defendant's guilty or innocent. As long as the attorneys have a fist fight, it's great, okay? It's a shame they didn't have video or, Instagram back then. But it was, so these two get in a fight. And I'm not going to tell you the verdict because it will thoroughly amaze you. Next, I'd like to ask Daryl, Dr. Hippensteel, to come up and talk about the cases that he would like to talk about, because he is actually a sheriff's deputy in Jefferson Parish, and one of the crimes occurred in his patrol district. So.
If I fall over, it's just because my brand new knee doesn't like me. This one. Yeah, we talked. How'd y'all on? I'm from Kansas originally, but I like to say that. I've been here since 1976. I'll just add a couple of things. The first thing is my pastor always opens, Pastor Reverend Dr. Rinker, a good friend of mine. He's a Lutheran pastor, and he opens his talks. He says, God only gave me 2 gifts, intelligence and humility. So I don't have either one of those, but I like it when he said that. When Alan and I were hanging around the office, yakking, instead of doing whatever we were supposed to be doing, we did talk about wanting to do something different for our students. Students don't want to read anything, and so we thought, well, we were all talking history, we were always talking history and criminal justice. Let's just do that. Let's just do something that's historical. So this covers 100 years, and you get to see the criminal justice system unfold and see how that works or didn't work. And so it's something that we thought our students would like, and we were pretty wrong about that. But the book has been kind of an interesting journey for us and my good friend Alan. In any event, I'm going to be a little bit different. Alan's very loquacious and very organized. And as a police officer, when you come upon a scene, things don't happen like that. The case doesn't lay out before you as you'd like it to, or as it does later after months and months and sometimes years of investigation. Deadly friendship is one of the strangest cases in all of America. So I'm just going to kind of start, and some of you might recognize what's going on here. I have to put on my glasses because I'm blind. On February 24th, 1984, let's pretend for a few moments that you're in your squad car. I still patrol this area where this house is, by the way. And so it was about 1:30 in the morning, and things might be slow or they might not be slow, but you get a call on the radio that says 2232 Litchwood in Woodmere. That's Harvey, Louisiana. Somebody, the operator's telling the 911 operator's telling the person, the police officer answering that. So the man at the house says somebody broke in at 2232 Litchwood, broke into my house and tried to kill me. I just stabbed him. Hurry, please hurry. Well, we get a lot of calls like that, and we never know what we're going to see when we get there, but it's nice to know that somebody was stabbed. We like to know those kind of things. We just wondered what else is going on. And if you've ever been a police officer, when you get somewhere, what does everybody do when you get there? Everybody's telling you it's the other guy, it's the other story. So you know you're only getting part of the story. So let's just assume that you went to the house with me, or with the officer. Gets there and he sees who happens to be a gentleman he learns later is Kerry Myers, and he starts telling his story. Well, I got home about 3:30 this afternoon. This is 1:30 in the morning, and I knew that this guy, when I opened the door, I knew him, and his name was Fontel, and he hit me with a bat and broke my arm, and we started fighting. Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. He's outside the house, so if you're a police officer, what do you want to do? Yeah, you want to go in. So you do go in, and the officer goes in. He sees some things that kind of surprise him. He sees a bloody and dented aluminum bat standing against the love seat, a bloody knife laying on the kitchen counter, some household objects, everything's in disarray, everything's shattered and strewn throughout the house. And all of a sudden, he sees adjacent to some boxes in the south. I gotta put up the picture, don't I, Alan?
Got a clicker, yeah.
I got a clicker.
Got a click, man. Got a click.
Let's see the intelligence.
You want me to put that?
This is the house at 2230. This is the house at 2232 Richmond. Still there. And they find next to the boxes, in addition to the other things, this body of Janet Myers. Investigators, the first detective sergeant was Robert Masson. He got on the scene and he sees all of these things. And the police had also searched the rest of the house and, of course, immediately determined that Miss Myers was, and I've been on these scenes, it's heartbreaking, is no longer with us. And they discovered in another room a little infant, who is Sarah, laying there, and another little 2-year-old boy named Ryan, who needs a diaper change. Sarah seems unhurt, but Ryan looks mortally wounded. And he was bludgeoned, nice word for a beating, but he was still breathing when the ambulance arrived. So you walk into this unbelievable scene, and the information that Mr. Myers is giving us is certainly incomplete at this point, and that happens all of the time. So we're kind of wondering what's going on, and so we're just beginning the investigation. Ultimately, the assistant coroner did find that Janet Myers died as a result of blunt force trauma to the head and face, and ultimately she died choking on her own blood. And they found that there had been no evidence of any sexual relations or anything like that, which was part of the case at one point in time. But in any event, Kerry Myers just tells the story that they were there for a while fighting. Well, an interesting little thing happens. Sergeant Masson gets a call from a local hospital, and there's a gentleman there by the name of Fontenelle with some awfully terrible-looking wounds on his body, telling the story that he was at a house in Woodmere the night before. This is like 7 o'clock the next morning. This thing happened theoretically from, we don't know what time yet. Mr. Myers was taken to the hospital with his wound, so we don't really know what's going on. But all of a sudden we have Mr. Fontenelle, who we'd been looking for anyway, just show up at the hospital. Well, the hospital police officer calls Sergeant Masson, and he goes over there and gets a lot of different information. So Mr. Masson's information that he learns from Fontenelle, he said he came to the hospital to be treated for some wounds that he had at this Myers residence, the one that you just saw there when we moved from there. There's baby Sarah. All right, baby Sarah. And there is Fontenelle, the gentleman that I'm talking about now. Well, Masson finds that Fontenelle tells Sergeant Masson that Myers and him had been close friends since high school days at Archbishop Shaw High School, and that both had known Janet Myers for about 5 years. And he says he went over to Kerry Myers' house to pick up a baseball bat that he left there the day before. He claims to have been at the Myers residence several times during the week prior to this night, but this particular day, he said he came about 1 p.m. while Carrie was at work. The husband of Janet Myers was at work. Carrie was the one that answered the door originally and made the 911 call. So they spoke about Fontenelle's separation. Janet and Mr. Fontenelle spoke about the separation of one thing or another. And Fontenelle alleged that as they were talking, they mutually agreed to have sexual intercourse. And he said he left Janet about 5 p.m. Fontenelle alleged that one thing led to another, of course, and he came back to the house, and so he left about 5 p.m. and to catch a ride with Carrie, Janet's husband, to a baseball game. Does this sound like this is kind of getting intriguing to you, if you're listening? We get this stuff all the time, so we know that something is desperately amiss. Here's what happened, in a nutshell. The call, what time did the call come out that the police officer responded to? You remember? Oh, you all are paying attention, huh?
That's never happened before.
Yeah, you're the only people that ever answered. Actually, some of you shout at. Yeah, 1:30 in the morning. We come to find out that about 3:30, the day prior, is when they entered the house together and ended up fighting with each other with a baseball bat, the alleged knife, for 10 hours. No one knows anything about the children, Myers or Fontenelle, and neither of them see Janet's body, which is right in the room when you walk in. How many of y'all believe that? So it's kind of like, who did this? How did this happen? Well, we're not going to tell you the whole story, but we're going to kind of tell you, look, reading this is fantastic because it takes months and months and months and months and months for police to investigate and piece this together with multiple interviews. And multiple interviews are wonderful because you talk to somebody one day, and of course they don't know that you're taking notes and recording that, and they change their stories, and it gets so interesting. But these two guys were unbelievable. They stuck to their stories. Ultimately, Fontenelle was arrested and charged, and Carrie Myers was playing the poor husband, right? But now police officers aren't as stupid as we look. Thank goodness for that, right? What do you think? You're all crime buffs. What do you think about that murder? What was interesting that you heard me say about that murder? Do you have any little pieces of evidence in your head that went on? Ramona, somebody, Rosa? Yeah, go ahead.
There was no evidence of sexual activity in the dead woman.
Yeah, so we now, of course, Fontenelle, the boyfriend, or the friend of Carrie Myers, however way you want to look at that, said that he had sex with her. However, we found out even later, that she'd just been cleared by the doctor after having a baby to have sex the day before. So it's, I don't know how likely it is that she's going to have sex that next day. Excuse me, I'm going to have to take a drink because I'm taking that stuff that dries you out. What's that called? That decongestant stuff. Okay. What?
Vodka.
Vodka. Well, this is my vodka. When you hit somebody in the face over and over and over and over and over again, what does that tell you? It's personal. It's really personal. I'll give you one bit of information. You've all heard of the blood spatter expert, Lee, Dr. Lee. He came and testified and said that the blood, whoever wore the genes that he had in here was the killer. It belonged to Carrie Myers. But Carrie Myers was never charged for the longest time. And Fontenelle, they tried twice. They couldn't find a jury to convict him. And finally, one day, they changed district attorneys and changed investigators years later. This was 1984 when it initially happened. And finally, in 1990, they arrested in 1988 Carrie Myers, the husband, as well. They were stunned. The family was stunned. But it gets even more strange in that they went to trial together. And I can go ahead and tell them because of what happened, right?
I don't care.
Well, basically, besides the story being so fascinating,
Just
you gotta
flip
read
the
it.
thing. Flip it.
They went in the same courtroom, but Kerry Myers decided to take the judges for a jury trial, a bench trial, and Fontenelle opted to have a jury listen to the same stuff all at the same time. You think they got the same sentence? No! Fontenelle gets manslaughter, he's out a few years back. Kerry Myers, that's where the house was and where she was living. There's the front door, you can't miss her. And this is Kerry Myers, who served his time in Angola and just got out a few weeks ago, right?
Click the next one.
Click the next one. Oh, that's the new one, yeah. Kerry Myers was released on the recommendation of his parole board for clemency by John Bell Edwards on 22nd December. Alan and I I think we heard the news about 10 minutes apart because we were trying to call each other going, man, we were stunned because it was...
The crime scene photo that he showed you was in black and white. We used to put it in color until the reactions that we got. If you had looked at those photographs in color, you'd go, what the hell was Bell Edwards thinking? Because it's...
Although we're not here to be political.
I'm sorry.
No. Be political all you like. It's your life. Mr. Mafia, man.
The Russians did.
Yeah, the Russian hacker. This is a must-read case. How many people have heard about this over there in the West Bank before? Oh, wow, yeah. Did you have a question?
Yes, did the son die eventually?
No, the son became a soldier, a decorated combat veteran hero, really true to life hero, doesn't have anything to do with his dad. I can tell him about it. He was 2.5.
Yeah.
He was interviewed by psychologists and psychiatrists, and one of them said that he remembers, telling this later when he was like 6 years old, he remembers that this Fontenelle, this big man, who was standing there at his house, and when his mommy walked out of the room, the man said, don't you tell anybody I was here, or I'm going to come back and hurt your mommy. So that was his kind of testimony from his memory. I don't know if any of you have any memories from when you're 2.5.
Yes.
Some do, some don't. I fortunately have no memories prior to yesterday, so I have to have notes. Fascinating case. The final broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. You know, who knows what this one is? Gotta be? Yeah, you probably are right. Again, somebody said earlier that we follow the money line, and that's true. But sometimes we look for motivations through the evidence. It's called victimology, looking at the relationship between the criminal and the victim and how that transpired. Certainly in the Janet Myers case, and we know as police officers, and I've been first on about 10 murder scenes, it's not much fun. There are other motivations besides just money. The human motivations, the evil that reigns in the human heart, right? Jealousy, greed, those kinds of things. Insanity, other things. We have all kinds of theories. But on August 31st, 2006, a lovely woman, again 3:30 in the afternoon in Metairie, on a lovely day, Elizabeth Liz Norman Caruso, thank you, Marinello, leaves an office building at 433 Metairie Road. I drive by it all the time. And I can't help but think of Liz. Liz was approaching her car, and how many people already know this story? Okay, thanks. When a scruffy, homeless-looking dude on a red bike comes up to her, you all know, right? Yeah. I don't know how a human being does this to another, being a Vietnam veteran and being a police officer since 1965. I see it all the time. puts it right in their face and pulls the trigger. And Liz, of course, died the next day at 2 a.m. in the morning. He fired 2 shots, point blank, right into her face. And we kind of know how this unwinds, but I'm just going to tell you, he gives himself away. He has a diagram at his little Katrina home of the actual place where he was going to go. There were people there who saw his little white car and had put the little bicycle away and put it in there and have him on camera. And so the police initially thought it might have been a random shooting, except for the shots in the face thing, you know. And so, again, police aren't as stupid as we think them to be. Pretty crafty folks, I've found overall, because they just don't believe anything, which is kind of our way to live, but it's good in that capacity. And of course, they found the disguise. And most interestingly, Marinello himself calls the police before they ever contact him again, like 2 days later, and says, oh, well, I was up in, he calls Fortunato, I can say that, right? Anybody know Fortunato? Yeah. I'm not saying anything about him, he just calls Fortunato because he knew the sheriff and everybody, right? He's friends, he's a big star. He's a sports guy. And so he says, oh, I was up there watching the Saints preseason game with my friends, and blah, 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 blah. So stupid. So what do they get first? What's the first thing you go for? Friends. To friends. What's the second thing you go for? Come on. Huh? Cell phone records. None of the cell phone tower pings matched any of the time frames that he had, so they naturally, he was already on the radar, okay? But now they really are going and they go to his place and they find everything. They just literally find everything. What is so fascinating is that they've only been married a short amount of time. He swept Liz, who was a much younger, beautiful woman, and off her feet with flowers, and all his stories regaling his mafia connections and how much money he had, and all the CDs he had in New York and that kind of thing. And none of it was true. The guy was a megalomaniac, psychopathic, liar, killer. And that was underneath his persona. And some people didn't see it. A lot of these people we find are exceptionally terrific at hiding their pathology. You talk to them and you don't know, but he was definitely sick and you could see it. At his wedding, he was so egocentric, because he wore his toupee everywhere, right? And he had a makeup artist following him around during the pictures of the wedding ceremony and the before, and patting him up and doing all of that kind of thing. And of course, Liz began to find out that things weren't as they were supposed to be, and she was going to leave him. He found out his ego couldn't handle that. So he's far and away to Angola now as well. Anyway, those are 2 fascinating stories that I think you'll enjoy reading. It was certainly heartbreaking and hopefully enjoyable to put those together for our students and for hopefully people like you, and certainly for the victims that we never want to forget. Thank you for your comment.
Did he have a motive?
C.S. Lewis says, all sins come back to pride. I found that to be one of the most fascinating motives for me when I'm working a case. C.S. Lewis said that, and it's true. No matter what your sin is, you're really being prideful. Whether it's you're after money, you're in competition, you want to have more than the next guy, or you want to take something, or whether you just want to blow somebody away in your street corner, there's an element of pride that happens in there. I don't know if that's what you're looking for. Marinello was insane and jealous and felt that he owned her. We see a lot of domestic violence situations. This one unwound very differently, but not unexpectedly, like it does. Excuse me?
Is he still alive?
Marinello? Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, he is. Not like the guy that was on the roof, on the bridge the other day. Thank you.
If you notice, when you mentioned the word mafia, he looked at me. Okay.
It's because when you talk to those people, tell them what happened to you when you went about in an Italian book. You going around those people, what happened to you, interviewing all those people?
Oh, I started talking with my hands. And I gained 45 pounds.
Yeah, that's
They don't let you leave at a house without eating. Which one is it?
I leave my water?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is it, wait.
Yes.
Yeah, it's yours. We have one more, a couple of footnotes I'd like to add to one of the cases, the Myers-Fontenot case. I'm really good friends with the crime scene direct commander, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Pasalacqua. He's retired now. And when he heard that Kerry Myers got out of jail, now this was 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was a Saturday, and he called me and just started to, now I kind of humored him, and I sat there and listened to him, and I said, yeah, eventually it's going to catch up with him. And if you look at the dedication of Dark Bayou, it's actually for the victims who won't be forgotten. The last one that I'm going to speak about actually draws a lot of controversy. I am not gifted with second sight, nor did I see a spot of blood on the moon last night. But I can see blood on the polished marble floor of this Capitol. For if you ride this thing through, you will travel with the white horse of death. This was Louisiana Representative Mason Spencer on September 8th, 1935. A respectable Baton Rouge, Louisiana physician received a letter from a nun who lived in Cork, Ireland, where she expressed the heartfelt emotions at the recent loss of the physician's son. I cannot refrain from coming to you this morning with my whole sympathy. I have talked of nothing else during the last day or two but of the awful catastrophe which has befallen you. If only he had been somebody else who had delivered the state of this man. You may be sure that God had regard for the motives and intentions more than the acts. And your boy's intentions were noble and patriotic. May he rest in peace. And that letter was written to the father of Carl Austin Weiss, who a lot of people often attribute to killing Huey P. Long, and this is where the controversy comes in. There's another chapter in this book called Louisiana Burning, and it's about the civil rights struggle in Louisiana. And I was on the phone with John Fox. Do y'all know John Fox? He is the FBI historian. And he says, where are you calling from? I said, I'm calling from Louisiana. He goes, you know, we got a Huey Long file up here. Really? He said, yeah, it hadn't been checked out in about 15 years. Would you like it? Oh, yes. And we were almost finished the book when this happened. And then Pon Hardy up in Baton Rouge State Archive says, hey, we got a state police file. You want to come look at this? I said, sure. And we did some examining. And before I was a teacher, I was a legal investigator. I used to spy on married people all the time. And also did a lot of short criminal investigations. So we put our heads together and we looked at these two files and put them side by side. We came up with 3 questions that have never been answered. Okay, first question is, Huey P. Long was shot on September 8, 1935. Why did it take 10 days for the bodyguards to testify as to what happened? Second thing, why didn't the federal government open up a federal investigation into his assassination? Okay, and the third thing is, Pavi, his Carl Weiss's father-in-law, was going to retire anyway. So any motive that the press said he had to kill Huey Long went out the window. And the FBI file kind of backed that up. Now, it was no secret. Everybody knew about it. The FBI file was there. It's just nobody bothered to look at it. And they sent it to us on a CD-ROM. And we looked at it, and I talked to a couple of people. And Ron and Curtis may disagree, but I don't think Carl Weiss killed Huey Long. For the specific reason is that there's so many discrepancies in the autopsy and so many discrepancies in the stories after that. And why did it take 10 days for the bodyguards to testify? Because they had to get the story straight. Okay? And why is it they never found a .32 caliber slug at Huey Long? But they did find a .45. Now, that came at the funeral home after, which has never been substantiated, but the people that wanted us to believe that, okay, had fed this information to a lot of people. I mean, if you look at the Times-Picayune, I hate to say this, but the Times-Picayune is skewed in some ways, okay? And a lot of times they don't get their story straight. When they do, they kind of wiggle through it. But if you look at what the press says and not what the records say, and the records say that it was an accident, but the cover-up ensued after. Now, we'll probably get a lot of controversy and people disagreeing with us, but we really don't care because, you know, when you go through all these books and you read about how many theories that these people have and they come up with these theories that don't really make sense. This is one that really does make sense because we used common sense to basically come to the conclusion that Carl Weiss did not shoot Huey Long. It is the only story in the book where we come to a conclusion. Everything else, we let the reader draw their own conclusion. Yes?
So, do you give any credence to the theory that there were ricochets from the
No.
bodyguards?
It was a misfire. It was a misfire. One of them pulled the 38 out and it fired. That's one of the bodyguards that came around the corner. Yes?
Look at the picture.
What about it?
If you take the gun out of Weiss's hand and you have a bodyguard pulling the gun, he's aimed right at you.
Mm-hmm. I just think, and that's another thing too, why was the weapon that Carl Weiss allegedly used in somebody's safety deposit box for over 70 years? Yes, ma'am.
Where did the 45 shot come from?
Bodyguards carried 45 automatics and Super 38s.
So why couldn't it have been a ricochet from one of their guns?
I don't think, if you go in and look at where they were standing, where they said they were standing, and you read their testimony, when they pulled the weapon, if they pulled the weapons out, it wouldn't have been anywhere near Marble Wall. And those weapons are known, now 45s and 38s, Super 38s were known to misfire. So, you know, like I said, we invite you to disagree. You know, everybody's good. It's kind of like the Jack the Ripper thing. Every year, 12 books are written on who Jack the Ripper was. And none of them make sense. But they write them because people want to read them. We didn't write this to satisfy the darkest imagination of everybody's psyche. We wrote it so that we could educate people. And there's a couple of crimes in here that I'm sure you have never heard of that really piqued a lot of interest for us. Anyway, there's one chapter in there about a madam who was murdered in New Orleans that eventually her fortune went to the education department. So, yes, sir.
Did y'all investigate anything about the pet cemetery murder?
What? Oh, the Renata? Is that the Renata murder? I've heard about a pet cemetery out here. I'll tell you what, we went through, I wish you'd come up here. We had about 35 cases that we looked at. And
One where a woman killed the husband, and then their daughter killed this one, and it's a guy that lives around the corner from us. He's in bed.
That's
and you had to move?
It's either you or the other guy.
No.
Can't take it there. I admitted it.
Oh, yeah?
You can't take it out. Yeah, that's
Okay, well then there's no fun in that. I mean, all right, admit it. You
He
know?
said that was the easiest way of getting out because he's 60-something years old. 10 years is a life sentence anyway.
Yeah. And Vince Marinello was 68, 69 when he was sentenced to life imprisonment. A lot of the story of Vince Marinello came from some interviews, but there was a lot of secondary sources. And the reason being is that Newell Norman, and I understand this, would not release any detectives for us to interview them because the case was still under appeal. So, you know, you run into that a lot. I was doing research for another book coming up about a guy named Brian Bibb. I don't know if you remember a guy named Brian Bibb, the Diamond Killer. And I'm still waiting for clearance on that. So The Huey Long thing I thought was going to be very, very easy, but it was not. It was very difficult because we had to sift through all these theories as to what happened. And Daryl said, it's not that complicated. It can't be that complicated. So we looked at the testimony of the bodyguards and said, this is what, when you eliminate all the impossible, what's left is the possible. And we eliminated everything. And we said, well, then, I mean, Weiss had bought a gun when he went to Paris.
However, you should buy the book and see if you agree with it.
Yes.
Based on the evidence presented.
Yeah.
What do you want me up here for?
I don't know. But to answer your question, no, sir, we didn't.
Bring the vodka. That's
He was asking me to come up here. Yes, go ahead.
I'm dying to know, did you cover the Axeman?
In my first book,
Louisiana.
Attack in Louisiana, I covered it at length. I interviewed the nephew of the last victim and the nephew of the only person that was ever charged with the crime. And I got to speak with them. Like I said, you know, I kind of fell into that one because it's in Gumbo Yaya, but my wife said, you know, you ought to put something gory in here. I said, okay, well, yeah. And there's a couple of other things in there as well. In fact, in that book, I talk a little bit about the kidnapping of Walter Lametta. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Well, that's in my next book. I kind of opened that up a little bit. But we enjoyed writing it. We, you know, had a great time. I hope you enjoyed reading it. If you like it, you know,
Tell your friends.
tell your friends. And, you know, it's been out since, how long has it been out?
They don't have any friends. Just stay home and watch all that crime.
And read books. November? Yeah, November of 2014. The book's been out since November of 2014. And
No, the Dark Bayou's been out since November of 14. That one came out a year before. And I wrote the foreword for that. Matter of fact, after Al and I just met, he said, I need somebody to kind of look at this. And I said, okay. I took it home, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I could not put it down. I sat there for about 11 hours reading and editing the book. It was, I knew I'd ran across a world-class author. And we were just friends before. He's such an idiot to talk to, and he really is. I put him up there with Gordon S. Wood and
Tiny Tim.
and Dave McCullough, whoever you might be interested in reading. He's a terrific researcher and author, and it was my joy to.
We'd like to thank you very much for being here, as much as we enjoyed being here. We have 2 books left.
Thank you, gentlemen. They'll be available at the table in the back with those 2 books and information how you can get some more of them. I want to remind you again about the information on the upcoming Mondays. If you're interested in that, you can find me all the time here at Nunez. If you want to be on the email list for the Historical Mondays or the St. Bernard History Lectures, you can add your name to the list in the back because we will use the History Lecture Series mailing list for those, okay? Thank you all so much, and we hope to see you next month when Ina Fandrich will be speaking about Tommy LaFawn. Thank you guys. Good night.